All right, so let's take a look at what isosceles means. So isosceles triangles are triangles that have two sides that are congruent, and the two sides that are congruent, their base angles are also congruent. So this is congruent to that, and the sides are congruent. If you have an equilateral triangle, you have all the sides and all the angles are congruent. And then if you have a scalene triangle, none of the sides are congruent. So equilateral, equal, all of them are congruent, everything is congruent. Isosceles, two sides and the base angles are congruent. Scalene, nothing. So let's take a look at isosceles real quick. So if I had this triangle and I was told that the two angles right here are congruent, then what can I say, if I turn this around, what can I say about these two sides? They're also congruent. Because the two base angles are congruent, the two sides are congruent. This is an isosceles triangle. So if I was asked to find the value of x, x is also equal to 7. Relatively easy. It tells me this is congruent to this. So therefore the two base angles, because this is now an isosceles, the two base angles must also be congruent. So what does that mean? How do I find what these two base angles are? Well, I know that all angles in any given triangle must always add up to what? 180. So if they add up to 180, right, and I already have 40, and I subtract that, these two angles added together must add up to what? 140. Well, if I know that they're exactly the same, then what does that mean about each one? I will take the 140 and divide it by 2, so each one has to be 70. Okay, so again, I'll just write that down. 180 minus 40 is going to give me 140. So that's what's left for these two angles. But I know that they're equal, which means they have to be the exact same number. So I take what they have to add up to, divide it by 2, because there are two of them, and that gives me 70. They each have to be 70. So 70 plus 70 is 140, plus 40 is 180. Okay, so just using what you know about the definition of an isosceles triangle. All right, the vertices of a right triangle are that, find the hypotenuse. Okay, so I'm going to do a rough sketch because I'm not going to figure out what this is. It goes, x goes from -1, -1, -5. So -1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See how I don't need graph paper? All I'm doing is doing a rough sketch, okay? Try and make them as equal as you can on both the x and the y. And the y goes from, the highest number is 4. So that should be enough, and the lowest number is 1. That's perfect. All right, so -1, 1. So -1, 1. That's 1 point. -1, 4. -1, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's another point. And then -5, 1. -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1. That's a point. So where's the 90-degree angle? Right there, right? And then it's asking you to find this hypotenuse. So what points were these two? It was -1, 4. So this one's -1, 4. And this one is -5, 1. Two ways that you can do it. I'm actually going to do it both ways just in case you have a preference on which one. I'll start off with what I feel is the easiest one, which is using Pythagorean theorem. Because this is a right triangle, I can use Pythagorean theorem. What is the distance from here to here? And you can count the boxes. Okay, so it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is 4. And then you can count the height, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now you have that. Now you draw my little guy, right? His legs, and he pees on C. So that's the hypotenuse C. Okay, A and B don't matter, so let's label that A, let's label that B. What does Pythagorean theorem say? And this is a formula sheet that you will be given. So it says A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So A is 4 squared plus 3B is 3 squared equals, I do not know what C squared is. 4 squared is 16, 3 squared is 9, equals C squared. That's 25 equals C squared, square root both sides. C is equal to 5. If you didn't want to do it that way, you didn't want to count the horizontal and vertical squares, then you can use the distance formula. Remember, the distance formula is the distance between 2 points. Here are my 2 points. And all you have to do is label them. It doesn't matter which one you label. So we'll call this one x1, y1. As long as the 1s go with the 1s. x2, y2. And the 2s go with the 2s. And then you just go into your sheet again, and let me find it. And you stick it into this formula. So the distance formula says that the square root, so distance is the square root of x2. All right, so x2 negative 1 minus x1 negative 5 squared plus y2 4 minus y1 1 squared. Okay, fix your signs when you have two negatives together, good or bad? Good. So that's going to become a positive. And then you're just going to put that in the calculator. So I'm going to say, and remember, I usually leave the square root in the answer in case they want it as exact form. So I wanted to keep teaching you how to do that. So we're going to do everything except the square root because I'm going to bring the square root down. So parentheses, negative 1 plus 5, close the parentheses, squared, plus, open parentheses, 4 minus 1, close parentheses, squared. Enter. So 25. So we're going to put 25 here. And then we're going to take the square root of 25, which is equal to 5. Now, if it wasn't a whole number, then I would now simplify my radical. But because it's a whole number, I'm good. So two ways. In this diagram below, ACT, in this triangle, D is the midpoint, that's the midpoint, O is the midpoint, and G is the midpoint. So these are all midpoints. And what does midpoint mean? If you're in the middle, then this is equal to this. If you're in the middle, then this is equal to this. Notice I'm doing 1 tick, 2 ticks, because this is not necessarily equal to this. And if you're in the middle here, then this is equal to this. All right, so now that I know that, AC is equal to 10. So if this whole thing is equal to 10, what's this individual piece? It's 5. So I'm just going to label it like this in case I need it. If AT, the whole thing is equal to 18, what's these individual pieces? It's each going to be 9, because remember it's in the middle, right? If CT is equal to 22, what's each individual piece? 11, just dividing it by 2. What is the perimeter of the parallelogram? Now, please, okay, don't think you know what it's talking about. A parallelogram, it has to be in the shape of a parallelogram, of CDOG. CDOG. Now, what do you know about a parallelogram? Opposite sides are what? Congruent, right? So I don't even have to work this out, but 5 and 5, opposite sides, 11 and 11, opposite sides are congruent. Now you're just finding the perimeter, so you're adding all of them together. 5 plus 11, 16 plus 5, 21 plus 11, 32. So your answer is D.